Hello,
Hello, Yousef.
how are you?
Great,
Hey,
great.
Yusuf.
Hello, Stephen.
Hey, nice to meet you. Such an honor to have you on.
Same here.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Thank you for having some time to join us. It's really a huge gift for both of us and for our listeners as well to learn from your wisdom. It's unbelievable.
Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to be with you.
Yeah, it's great. It's unbelievable. So, maybe first of all, I would love to give an introduction of Yousef to our listeners who may not be familiar with his work. Yousef is a very special guest in our OpThink show, and Yousef is a true Khemitian wisdom keeper, musician, scientist, researcher, speaker, music, stonemason, and many, many more things he does in his life. And Yousef, to me, you are the perfect example of real syncretism man who embraces both of the hemispheres of the brain, logical and intuitive. And because of this, you are able to see that bigger picture of what's happening in the world and in our ancient history, and how we can learn from that, and how we can, just change our current situation. And that's really phenomenal. So thank you for doing all of that and joining us today.
Thank you. Well, definitely, learning from the ancient civilizations develops more awareness to yourself. So that's why it's very interesting because it's connected to the self-awareness. It's not just any kind of information that we are gathering. It has something to do with our existence and understanding the humankind.
Right. It's not just looking at things, you are also a musician. You play the flute. There's several videos of YouTube where I play inside the pyramid or even outside. And that, to connect this artistic with the scientific approach, and keeping an open mind. That's really valuable these days, and your videos are very informative, and we're going to get into this in just a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we also know that you are the son of the famous Abdel Hakim Awyan, the ancient wisdom keeper. So maybe you just can share your story, how it was to grow in such a huge family, having so many sisters and brothers, and to be able to learn from such a wonderful man like your
Yeah.
father, and how was that? Maybe you could share.
Well, my father and teacher, Abdel Hakim Awyan, of course, I remember like almost daily he would return back from the field and sit and talk about many things, many different things, what he experienced, sometimes new ideas and people that he met and what they brought to the table, because this is more also about connecting with others to understand more, share what you know with others and then listen to them, what kind of reflection they got from what you shared with them. So you can also learn more. It's not, you know, it's not just something that when my father talked about the oral tradition, he talked about the many of the things that the culture passed down throughout the ages, not something that was passed to him personally, but it was his study to look in the roots of what was passed down and the similarity of the culture we are living in today and the ancient one. And believe me, there is big similarity. There is huge similarity between both because the people themselves are still living, even if they're talking a different tongue, but the ideas and the tradition is still the same. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's something that
So,
modern science is completely ignoring the past, the oral tradition passed down from father to son, mother to daughter, or however. Uh, there
from generation to generation.
an unbroken line. If you take a scientific book, somebody has, written that, and that was his thoughts, or so. But the oral tradition is really what can connect, like you said. Wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So, plus his own research and understanding that the timelines of the ancient Egyptian civilization can go much further back in history, and that the few thousand, 5,000 years that the books are talking about is not everything there. And of course, the books talk also about the pre-dynastic civilization, but they date it around 7,000 BC, while we can understand from other things like geology and like carbon dating for some of the mummies that they can go for more than 12,000 years ago. So between 12 and 14,000 actually. Some of the carbon dating of the pre-dynastic mummies and things like that. So definitely we don't have a certain timeline for the dynastic Egyptian civilization. So also the pre-dynastic and the possible, of course, pre-cataclysm civilization, the one that many people believe in today. So he studied and researched many years, my father, and some of the minds of like mainstream Egyptology wouldn't accept some of the things he would share. So that's where the label chemitology, coming from the word Khemit, which is more ancient label for Egypt, they developed him and Stephen Miller. Um, he's a famous author. He wrote a few books with my father and on his own. So they developed together the phrase chemitology, so it can be a new label to put the studies and to research about the ancient mystery under. So Kemet is the famous name for Egypt before Het Kaptah, where the word Egypt is coming from. So they chose this label not to talk about a different civilization or anything. It's the same civilization, but with a new understanding, or to research the unknown in that civilization. Because most of Egyptology, mainstream Egyptology, they would tell you from the books what sounds like a complete story, and that there is like everything in it is figured out from industrials and machining and symbolism and religious and everything. And of course, that cannot be true. The ancient civilization has mysteries in all levels. So the most interesting one is the one that is connected to the structure itself, what it contains, the shape, the materials, and the connection between the construction and the mythology is also very important. But we don't know who is first.
Yeah.
Was it the structure first or the myth? Of course, we believe that the construction was built from much more ancient time, and most of what the dynastic Egyptians understood about it became the myth, especially the myth of creation, talking about things like the primordial mound and the primordial water, the bin shape, which is the pyramidian shape, the atom, which is one of the netters, or so-called gods from ancient Egypt, and it's a certain stage of the sun, the complete, that's what it means. It's supposed to be the first creation coming out of the primordial water. So we find all these elements actually in the pyramid structure itself, the primordial mound and the primordial water and the bin, which is the pyramid itself. And it's labeled as something, as a tomb. Of course, everyone knows that all the Egyptologists are labeling the pyramids as tombs, which is something about death. So why would this be connected to the myth of creation, of life, even from the ancient civilization? Because all the pyramid sites was found like burials where it was used as a burial. And my father talked about this also. And the Hanuti. Hanuti means the undertaker, or the people who do the mummification. So it was known that the pyramid site would have many burials. Of course, in Egyptology, they know this. That's not hidden information or anything. But they would say like all the relatives or all the priesthood that used to work for that king, that they believed in him as a god, they would really want to be buried close to him, to his burial. Supposedly, the main or the great pyramid in the pyramid city, there used to be something called the pyramid city. It's not just a tomb. There used to be a city that surrounds the pyramid construction, and it has many different priesthoods. Some is called, like for example, the Hemneter priest. This was a very high level of priesthood, and others called Hemka priest. and other ones for purification, for example, called the Wa'ad priest, and many, many different priesthoods that, you know, activated the pyramid city for many years. Like Cheops, for example, the best example, of course, the Great Pyramid was all the way until 300 BC. You can find the name Cheops. What I want to return back to is that most of the burials are not from the same timeline of the writing that we related the pyramids to. No, most of them, if we talk about Khufu or Zoser or any of the pyramids, the site and the caves and the shafts underneath it was used throughout the ages, from the timeline of what so-called the Old Kingdom time, all the way until the late period, and some extended to the Coptic era and to the Islamic era also, inheriting older sites. And you can find the trace. That's why studying this on the field is now, in my opinion, more important than symbolism in many cases, than translating writings or looking at the alternative meanings of symbolism. To study the stones, to study the different machinery which was originally done by certain tools, and then inheritors recycled these stones throughout the ages. So if we trace it backwards, we will find evidence, for example, in Old Cairo, in some of the Islamic mosques. I will give you the example of Nasser Muhammad ibn Qalawun Mosque. This is inside the citadel of Salah ad-Din. There are few mosques. This one, for example, there is like pillars inside this mosque. It's from many different structures. Some of them is taken from other structures from the Roman time, made out of marble. Some of them are taken from the Coptic era, which was taken from the Roman time. And the ones that's taken from the Roman time were originally taken from dynastic Egyptian sites, or pre-dynastic also, or pre-cataclysmic, which is like you can find series of huge granite pillar, single solid pieces inside this mosque. That's of course definitely was once in a pyramid structure, and then was used by the Romans, and then was used again by the Arabs. So these are facts, and that's why we can look at these things and understand things with not much of another opinion on the other side. That's a definite. This is a tool. This is a marking of a tool. This is a stone. We know the source. We know where it was coming from. We have more than one example. Like inside this mosque, there is a pillar with a cross on it. So definitely this pillar was once used in a church. And in other cases, you find a pillar in a church that used to be one obelisk before in a temple. And the obelisk in the temple, you can find on it different writings from different timelines. One of them, of course, is more modern than the other. And then Egyptologists would normally relate this obelisk to the oldest writings on it. Even if you have sometimes 3 different writings on one statue, but then the style of art is related to a certain dynasty. So they wouldn't relate the statue to any of the names that's carved on it. What I want to say is also dating the sites and artifacts, like boxes, like things like that, using the writings on it or the names on it is not 100% accurate. No, because these devices, that lots of it, most of them actually is reflecting power tools and high-tech machining. These items, these devices, these tools, these artifacts were inherited and were reused in many different ways. So this is one also fact. That's what we need to stick with, so the research can go further. Because with symbolism, of course, you know that I can have an opinion, he can have one, and we can argue about it, you know, and you know, some people will go here, but we need a solid foundation to stand on and continue the research to further, stages. So
Yeah, and one of the signs, a lot of the artifacts were taken away. Uh, to various museums or and whatnot. And Christina and I actually had the chance to go in Berlin to the new museum, which has the Egyptian sarcophagi and other many artifacts, original artifacts there. Also
yes,
including Nefertiti, and we looked at the sarcophagi, at many of them, and inside we saw actually a line which looked like there was standing water in there or some sort of liquid for a while, different
yeah,
levels. So
yeah,
that is very curious because you would think, why would there be water in there if it's a tomb? So what do you think that means?
exactly. I think you got the point. I want to tell you also that some of these devices, like boxes and like also what's known as a shrine, which is also a box with a bin on top, which is a pyramidian shape, these devices are very ancient. And the dynastic Egyptians were aware of this. So you can find in the so-called Greco-Roman temples, and in the center point, the part that's labeled as the Holy of Holies, you will find that they will bring one of these ancient devices, like a box or a shrine, and put it inside. So they understand that it's more than just a sarcophagus. But there are many chambers. Especially, I'll give you a good example, which is the Osirian shaft here connected to the causeway of the middle pyramid here of Khafra,
Mm,
Chafrin, and it has 3 levels underground. It has chambers with boxes in them, and they're all empty. And Egyptologists label it as a symbolic tomb for the god Osiris. So many things are thought of as symbolic, but it's time to look at these things more as functional, not symbolic or decorational, because we will go to the type of stones that these artifacts are made out of, and it's not, it's, it's very hard to bring these types of stones from the destinations they brought. Very big combination, very big, number of different types of stones. Let's take rose granite, for example, or quartzite, white calcite, basalt stone, milky quartz, schist or slate, different types of limestone, clear quartz, rock crystal, amethyst, and the other minerals and the other, many different types. And they brought these types of stones from very far and different destinations, and they gathered them all in the pyramid structure.
mm,
Mm? As we said, the sites were used as a quarry. Unfortunately, this is a fact. Nobody can deny. No Egyptologist can deny this. That the sites was used as a quarry throughout the ages. So, can you hear me clear?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about the Islamic era. We go to the Coptic era. Many examples. Also, the same examples you can find in the Coptic. Um, for example, the Coptic Museum in Old Cairo. It's not just the stones were inherited. The symbolism also was inherited. So you find the tombstones from a Coptic era, and instead of the normal cross that you know, it's the key of life. And you see the figures of Wipwawat or Anubis and Horus still carved on these stones, even that it's not ancient Egyptian religion anymore. But as I told you, this is what was passed down. These things were passed down through the culture itself, with
Mm-hmm.
any religion that came to Egypt after that. And if you went, to area like El Ashmonain, Central Egypt, for example, there is a basilica there in El Ashmonain, and you will find writings on different parts of the stones in this basilica that is related to much more ancient times, like the New Kingdom time and the Middle Kingdom time. So we know that these stones were not brought from Aswan to build the basilica, of course. These stones, they belong to older structures that they were reused to build these other structures. And symbolism will be added on it, from that era. For example, Isis temple in Aswan, there is a section in it that the writings from it was erased, by chipping it away. It was carved on the walls, and then they made this part of it as a church. So
Oh,
there is an altar from rose granite. We know this altar is much more ancient than Coptic Egypt, but they add the symbol of the Coptic cross on it. So let's take, for example, this is one very good example, because here we cannot deny that this is a church, but was it originally a church? That's as simple as that. Of course not. This church is a little transformation inside the temple. But what if an entire site was transformed from like different parts of it, and then it gave the false impression that this was originally a tomb? What if the tomb was the reuse of that ancient megalithic structure, and by mistake we entered it and we saw that it was used as a tomb throughout the ages, so we thought of it as a burial ground?
yeah.
And all the idea of the burials in the west and the east, this is not for sure. This was like things that historians like developed with time. They understood it this way, because when you enter the site and you already have the idea of a tomb inside about it, then you will see everything based on what you have already on your mind. You know what I mean? As we like to see it, like you see what you know.
Yeah.
You know.
And what are the non-physical implications of taking over such a powerful structure and putting your intent on that? What are the implications for whole humanity, you might ask? We know that these are very powerful places, and changing what they were uh, built to be is, kind of changing the intention of what it's for, and I wonder what application that has. Some of them may be obvious, for immediate people that live there and the whole humanity for that matter.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. Explaining it as a tomb, of course, is not enough. First, it was empty from inside. Everyone knows this, but it was accessible. Most people think the Great Pyramid was only opened during the 8th century, but not all people think that. But that's what everybody nowadays say, as if there is no second opinion about this. But there are other Egyptologists, famous ones, and Egyptian, especially Egyptian one, Ahmed Fakhri, his name, he says that it's for sure the pyramid was open in the Greco-Roman time. So, and the late period, of course. So that would be like 300 BC, 400 BC, all this time where it could be accessed, and maybe things were taken out of it. Definitely, there used to be rose granite in the subterranean chamber. We don't know when was this taken away, and why would someone bother quarrying from the core of the pyramid these hard stones and then move out in narrow channels to take it out, while there are tons of granite in the outside? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
definitely the interior of the pyramid is not the same. Many things happened inside, which shows that it could have been opened more than once and maybe closed also. We put in mind that same like people who inherit, they quarry from the site. Others, they try to renovate and they try to bring the site back to life. Not with the same materials, because they couldn't, of course, but sometimes they will use more simple things, smaller blocks of stones, or sometimes even mud brick and plaster. So that you can see this clearly in the third pyramid structure that it was renovated. You can see also this in Abu Sir. And Abu Sir actually is the one that was excavated by Ludwig Burckhardt, the archaeologist and from Germany. He's the one who found the bust of Nefertiti.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who did the research also on Amarna. But he did his work also on Abu Sir, and he was able to move many of the scenes from the walls with the help of 300 men. And this was back in 1907 to 1912. I think they were celebrating the 100 years, right? In 2012, about these artifacts in Germany. And we go back with the site transformation. So in the New Kingdom, you find much more examples of ancient artifacts that is related to the New Kingdom by mistake, because in the New Kingdom you will find like hundreds of examples, not just one or two, of writings that was added to artifacts like giant megalithic statues or entire sites will have new writings added to it. And take one of the best examples as Ramses II, for example. Some people by mistake, they call him Ramses the Great. They think he did all these things. They related all these sites to Ramses because the name is carved on the walls. But that is not a solid proof 100%, as I said before, to relate these giant statues or these entire sites to Ramses, because it could have been, the writings could have been added later. And we can show hundreds of examples to prove that it was added later. And many people nowadays understand. And not just him, also Merim Betah, his son, and also Tutmosis. It was a very common thing to add writings on older stuff, older statues or boxes, or even entire structures sometimes. And the most, in the Egyptology books, they say they are aware of this, of course. They are aware of the, as I said, that the sites was used as a quarry. And they have things documented in the Egyptology, in the mainstream Egyptology books, about quarrying from the Giza Plateau during the Middle Kingdom. And a very famous example, which is a pyramid further to the south called El Lisht, and they found this pyramid, they relate this pyramid to the Middle Kingdom, and they found that the renovation of the casing stone, or the casing stone on it, has writings from the Old Kingdom. So what they found, or what they understood, is that this pyramid was originally they built it from stones that used to belong to structures from the Old Kingdom. You get what I say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it doesn't have to be 100% also correct, because the whole structure can be much more ancient, and only the casing stone was used or was renovated from these stones in the Middle Kingdom. So that, as far as Egyptology books goes, then we all know that the era of the pyramid builders in the mainstream Egyptology is what's known as the Old Kingdom. And there are evidence, but it's not in books. These are things, it's not in books yet. We, inshallah, will bring this to light soon, inshallah, when we can document this the right way. There is a location of one of the tombs from the Old Kingdom here in the Giza Plateau for one of the priests of Shipsis Kef. He was one of the pharaohs from the end of the 4th dynasty. The 4th dynasty is supposed to be the timeline of the original builders of the pyramids, you know, all Cheops and Khafre and Macarius. They are all from the 4th dynasty, as the mainstream Egyptology say. So in this tomb, which was discovered by the famous Egyptian archaeologist Ahmad Fakhri back in his excavation on the Giza Plateau in the 30s, and he found a set of altars for offerings inside this tomb, and he labeled it as like weird looking or unique shape of an altar, because the altar of offering is known as the hatib, or other shapes for altars are known. So these ones were just round and with a seam on the side. So he actually missed something there. These altars for offerings are actually bases of pillars, used to be in another structure, and when this priest was building his tomb, he used the bases of pillars from that older structure in his tomb as offering altars. So we see in that tomb, Rawir, a very, very clear evidence that recycling stones actually is happening from the old kingdom itself, from the fourth dynasty, and the timeline that suppose the original builders were building the pyramids in.
Yeah.
I value something like this because this is solid. This, nobody can say it might be this or it might be that. This is here on the ground. And then the search or the research also of the technology and the tools that the original builders had. The ancient Egyptian that built the pyramids, in that timeline, there used to be tools, and we cannot find these tools in the depictions or the artifacts of the dynastic Egyptians. We're talking about a lost technology. So
Yeah.
that's here the truly interesting part.
Very interesting. Maybe you
Yes,
can just share a little bit about the Serapeum, and we also know that there were some kind too of the different structures like those boxes, which are very hard to make even these days, if possible at all. And also we see those carvings on them, which look like completely from different era. So what maybe you can
yeah.
share here and just dwell here.
That's why one of the main things why we cannot date and relate and identify these artifacts based on the writings on them. You saw yourself, if you've seen the writings in that box in the Serapeum, it cannot be labeled more than hieroglyphic graffiti. It cannot be made by the same people who created that surface or did this work. It's 100 ton. This box is 100 ton, made out of a stone called cyanite, which we used to label as black granite. And we understand from Egyptology, or most of Egyptologists think all granite is coming from Aswan. Actually, not this type of granite, and that's what we're studying now with geologists like Susan Moore and, of course, Dr. Robert Chuck. They're both geologists, and they have great wealth of knowledge. And we understand now cyanide is coming from the Eastern Desert. That's a destination without a river that you can actually load a boat, even if this theory is correct, and they did load them. And especially the Serapeum, because it's not constructed, it's tunnels carved in the bedrock itself. And so it's quite challenging. You can think always and always think of the challenges. Me as a stone carver, I understand this very well. I work with power tools, and I cannot accomplish 60% of what they accomplish supposedly with copper chisels, and that's So, and then of course the work of Christopher Dunn and the work of Brian Forster about the lost technology. That's the first to realize this and the documented was, of course, Flinders Petrie, the famous historian, and he found these vessels, and inside the vessels, the core was taken by a tube drill, and that's something we only realized in the end of the 18th century, because it was the time when we reached the level of industrial and machining to understand the marking in the stone, what can it be done by. But before that, all the research that was done in more ancient time in history, we cannot be looking for advanced machining because we didn't have it. When we had it, we saw it. When we knew it, we saw it in the ancient civilization. Same like today, when we look at it and we compare it with the work of Nikola Tesla about wireless energy. If you talked about anybody about wireless energy, like in the 18th century or it was not going to be something that people will follow you because they cannot imagine what you're talking about. But today you can imagine. Of course, you know, you use it. You know, even there is like a cell phone charger with wireless energy, you know, and many other things. So the idea itself became acceptable today that we can research it. Maybe you are in the right level now, so to understand
Hmm.
this. So the lost technology is definitely there. No one, I say no one, can deny the existence of ancient advanced power tools used by the original builders. We find these markings of circular saw machining and the tube drill machining in the pyramid structure, in the main structure, in the basalt, in the hard stones like basalt stone and like granite stone and like white calcite and quartzite. So is that all? No, of course not. Flinders Petrie found the marking of these tubular drill in vessels, and some of them were from related or found in burials from the pre-dynastic Egypt. So we have like little civilizations, the one that they call pre-dynastic Egypt. The most famous one in central Egypt was called El Amra and Jerza. And there was other one further to the south, and it was called the Tasa and El Badari. And there was another one in the north that was called Marmada, and more. So the one in Jerza, the one in central Egypt, they did found in the burials of these very primitive people. We're talking about the era of the modern Stone Age and hardly the beginning of Copper Age. And some of them are related to the Mesolithic Age, that's more ancient than the Neolithic or the modern Stone Age. So in these burials, very primitive houses made from mud and straw, even the pottery in the pottery jars in these burials were not made by a wheel. You know what I mean? They were made just by hand, and the way it was burned shows clearly, like the higher part is always darker black and the lower one is brown. These are made by hand. The idea of the wheel itself was not there, but you find in the burial this type of pottery and jars made out of porphyr and quartz and granite and basalt, made by tube drill machining, this high-tech advanced machining. How? How could they have both? Something that is really so primitive and something that is really so advanced. And this is in Central Egypt, and the types of stones we're talking about, some of them is coming from the south, from Aswan. That's more than 700 kilometers to the south. And the others are brought, the porphyr and the Persia and slate and these types of stones are coming from the chain of the Red Sea Mountains. That's a different destination in a timeline that, of course, there was supposedly no roads, there was no transportation. Who would really take the challenge to go all the way to these sites just to bring a stone to make a vessel? And of course, again, how are they going to carve these? There are scenes from the fourth dynasty showing the vessels manufacturing. And the tools they are showing in this, and this is dynastic Egyptian, of course, all the kingdom. And the tools they are showing, the drills they are showing, are not tubular drills, and they will never give the results of some of the vessels that we see. And it was supposed to be this industrial was complete by the time of the first dynasty, because like treasuries were found and hidden and or stashed underneath the tunnels, underneath in the tunnels underneath the pyramids, like the ones in Saqqara, for example. Very famous one that was discovered there. Not one, I mean famous treasury of stone vessels, and they were around 40,000 vessels from all
Yeah.
these different types of stones, and also the writings on them were graffiti, but that's all the kingdom. And
Yeah.
yeah, so there is of course a big possibility that these people inherited something that was already there.
Yeah.
And of course,
And what fascinates me also, like those boxes, they are very highly polished, like they can mirror the light, but they also can, work with sound acoustics. And I saw one video when you just were going into those boxes and you just made some sound, sounds. And that was
yeah,
really amazing how they just vibrated. And so it's really phenomenal.
it's a possibility.
Yeah.
It's a possibility that they interacted with sound, but there is not enough research so far about sound resonance and this. And as a musician, I enjoy this more than I study it, actually. I enjoy being inside. And also, there are the chambers themselves here in the Giza Plateau. Some of them you feel that it was made actually for sound purposes and
Yeah.
different frequencies, and the shape inside that's known as the false door, it's looking so acoustic. And inside the red pyramid also, the ceiling of it is, some people like would label it as a frequency regulator, actually, not just something decorational or simple, or because they had to do the ceiling like that. Yeah, definitely. The polishing is another mistake by Egyptologists, and it should be corrected because there is no doubt. And you take the Serapeum as a good example. The surface was polished by some alchemy formula. It was a liquid that they polished the surface with, and not what the Egyptologists think, because here is the theory, or here is what you're going to read if you want to know how it was polished. They think with a piece of rock and sand and water. They think this how the polishing
Hmm.
was made, and that's of course only shows very limited understandings of these kinds of stones and of the process of machining. It requires more to engineers and people who really works with stones to go over these theories, because definitely historians can what they can see is not good enough, because they are not engineers. So they accepted the theories of how the pyramids was built primitively, and all these things, how the polishing was made, how all this can be done primitively, and that's the main question. We have a question now, and we have lots of things to support like both ways. The question is like how the pyramid was built. Was it a primitive civilization or advanced civilization? That's the question that nobody gave a final answer for it now. Of course, the Egyptologists have the answer. They think it's primitive and everything was done by lots of workers and all by hand tools and things like that. But what we see in the markings of the stones in basalt stone in the Giza Plateau or in the Egyptian Museum, there is an unfinished box, or of course the unfinished obelisk in Aswan. There is two actually. The way they took the stone out of the granite mountain is unbelievable. First of all, there is like at least three different kinds of quarrying the stone inside in the quarry. in the quarry of rose granite in Aswan. Because we know also that the site was also stayed as a quarry, was used as a quarry also for many ages until the late period time and the New Kingdom time. And the two of them or three of them, the primitive ones, are clear, and you can see them and you can understand what kind of process was happening, making the pits in the stone, creating a weaker point in a certain level, and then putting the wood inside it and pour the water. You cause a pressure because the wood expands from the water, and then this pressure will cause the stone to crack. It's cracking the stone, not cutting. And that's the primitive style. It's clear. The other one around the unfinished obelisk, which is looking like scooping this rose granite, and what Egyptologists think it was being crushed by diorite pounders, and it's. I will only like give you what Professor, our teacher, also Christopher Dunn said. He just said it's a ridiculous theory, and you need to listen to really to an engineer because he knows what he is saying. He's a professional. That's his field. We understand what kind of marking is belonging to what kind of tools, and the way these lines around the unfinished obelisk, the second one especially, there is two actually, the main big one, the 1,200 ton one, but then there is another one that the work also reached underneath it, but it was not completed. It's a smaller one. This one, the lines are continuous, all for 4 meters straight, and then forming a step underneath the obelisk, and then coming out upside down with it. So, this kind of result clearly cannot be done by pounding, because now you're going to have to be pounding, upside down. That's, if you just see it. I shared many photos of it before, if you saw that. So that's one of the other theories about how the obelisk was being hacked out of the mountain, and definitely by the engineers such as, also I will say it again, Christopher Dunn, which we are looking forward to his book being published in Arabic, because we're going to share it here widely.
Wow, great.
Yes, it's inshallah soon it will be published in Arabic and will be shared here, because this will open the mind of Egyptologists to a different world. I'm sure they will rethink everything, inshallah, once this book is published in Arabic. So the original builders, we still don't know what timeline we can label them. They had tools that we've been looking for any evidence of it in the dynastic Egyptians, and so far we cannot find it, but we can find other types of tools, which shows that they didn't understand about the tubular drill or the circular saw. And I talked with some Egyptologists before in this about that subject itself, and about the vessels especially, and how they can have this and I showed them the depictions on the walls from Saqqara that shows the process of manufacturing vessels, and how the unfinished ones that has the tubular drill shows, of course, that this was not how these vessels were being made. So when they couldn't prove anything, this man suggested, this Egyptologist, God bless him, suggested something, that this was a sacred knowledge hidden by the priesthood, same like the knowledge of mummification. That's what he would imagine, that if we cannot find the answer, then perhaps the priesthood had it as a secret knowledge. And of course I disagreed with him, because the vessels are found in the pre-dynastic time, before they develop the system and the priesthoods. You know what I mean? So there used to be no priesthood back in the pre-dynastic time. So it cannot be a knowledge that was hidden in the hand of the priest because there was no priest yet. These people were hardly manufacturing things from stone, and in the very, very, very beginning of the Copper Age in some of the eras, and also the very, very beginning of just starting to do agriculture and make agriculture tools. Very, very simple tools they had. They could not have sophisticated technology like tubular drill and things like that. And another subject which is very, very interesting, geology. Geology is one of the knowledge that has like a true piece of the puzzle in this mystery. We, if you are familiar with the work of Dr. Robert Chuck around the Sphinx enclosure,
Yeah.
are you familiar with this
Yeah.
work?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's a great scientist and a very, very humble man at the same time. And it was my honor also to tour with him and understand from him personally why he thinks that the Sphinx is much more ancient than all the writings around it. And I already accept the idea not to date anything based on the writings around it. So what he said, what he proved, not just to us, but to other geologists, that the erosion around the Sphinx is caused by a rain. To make this as simple as possible, this rain only existed 9,700 years BC. That's so that erosion in the Sphinx and in the Sphinx enclosure cannot be less than 9,700 BC. That's different than Egyptology, like way of finding the timeline. This is geology, and clear. It can be much more than that, because 9,700 BC is when this type of rain stopped. Not, so of course it would take long time to cause the erosion, for this rain to cause the erosion itself. But it cannot be more modern than that, because that rain stopped 9,700 BC. And it will match some of the other things. Other people like Flinders Petrie himself, he dated back some of these pre-dynastic civilization also to 10,500 BC. But nobody talks about these timelines at all. Even if also the ancient books written by the Egyptian historian Manitou, who wrote the history, but it was, of course, his book, unfortunately, was lost, and only chapters of it was passed down through other researchers who were looking for something else. Eusebius, he was the one who passed down some of the chapters of the book of Manitou. So Manitou talks about dynasties that also like 300 kings and more, not just the kings list that we know about. So the civilization, the dynastic civilization itself, can go to eras from the pre-written language time. That's a possibility. Or that there used to be a civilization, advanced civilization, and it ended with a cataclysm, like the flood or the solar flares and these things. And then others inherited what was already there and developed their civilization above the ruins of an older one. But by mistake, we related these ones, same like we relate the Coptic altar or the Egyptian dynastic altar to the Coptic part of the Isis temple, the church and Isis temple. So if we have the symbol on it, it doesn't mean that we can relate it. We have the writings, the hieroglyphics written on something, like take the Serapeum also as a good example, or Memphis, the area that hardly anybody visits. There is a great temple there, need to be saved, the Temple of Ptah, one of the most famous and mysterious knitters. And it needs major saving. And many other sites, and many different types of stones. I didn't even tell you like 20% of the combination of stones. It's really overwhelming amount, and we are seeing more and more. For example, another example, everyone thinks there is a stone called or known as imperial porphyr. That stone, for example, everyone thinks it was used during the Roman time. It's purplish with white dots in it. And this, this stone is not only in Egypt. This stone is in South America. I saw it when I went traveling with Brian Forster to uh, Peru. And in that site, especially called Ollanta Tambo, there are megalithic blocks of imperial porphyr, and definitely it's not a Roman structure. You know what I mean? And the fact that we found, based on our geology research lately, after we've been working with, as I told you, Robert Chuck and Susan Moore, and we found vessels from Dynasty 1, that's supposed to be 3000 BC at least, and it's made from imperial porphyr. Imperial porphyr is not a local stone in Central Egypt. It also comes from only one location, which is called the Smoke Mountain in also the Eastern Desert. So there is lots and lots of question marks, like truly things need to be reconsidered and things need to be researched again for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe you could share some insights of yours of Great Pyramid and the explosion that supposedly happened there. Because we like Christopher Dunn does the investigation about the pyramid being as power plant, so maybe there was kind of the explosion happened there because we see the burned walls and that. So what maybe you from your own experience when you was there, and what can you share here?
Well, we cannot understand how it was working 100%. And we think more of implosion, not explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also, these are theories. So the research must, and there is no escape, we must begin with how it was built before we look into all the things we see and how it was functioning. And then we look for why it was built, you know. So there are three levels for that research. I cannot escape how it was built and go, because what you're asking now is about the function of the pyramid itself, and that is really, it requires a true research, requires scientists from many different fields. You name it. But what I can tell you, we understand from the lost advanced technology that we are looking at something that can be beyond our imagination or our limited theories. It can be, because to look at the pyramid and to look at the challenges in building it, you will know that if you have the power to build it, you already have a big amount of power. Just so you build it. So imagine what you're gonna get out of it. That is truly requires a research, a true one. I can tell you, of course, tens of theories and hundreds of imaginations, but we want to have something serious going into this matter, because it can develop things. If it's about free energy, I think we all need energy. And I think it's more than just free energy. So what we understand through the Tesla technology is a very small part of the pyramid. What we understand as the sound, acoustic, and is also a very small, is one current, not the main. Hmm? If we want to understand about electromagnetic induction and electromagnetic radio and the cosmic radio, many things are like these. All these elements has like a fusion inside the pyramid. We wouldn't understand how do you gather these all this inside the pyramid, how you do this fusion, how you blend these powers, and what is the result. Why is the alignment with the magnetic north? And it's also like that activation, this activation that is invisible, with no sound, with no light, with it's quite activation. We would never understand it. Only because of the pyramid existed, we understood this, and this is part of the pyramid research that's happening from more than 100 years. Where did this research go? Why none of it saw the light? Why we don't have it in our life? It's a clean energy. We know it has healing powers. We know it have many things. Why is it not in our life? Why we are still focusing on things that's artificial? That's not about interacting and tuning in with nature, but more of artificial things. So maybe these kinds of powers are too powerful for us to be passed down to us, or to be allowed to be given to us by the systems ruling our life. So, but I am sure if me and others as individuals, we can see this clear, and we can see that this is a subject that is truly worthy of a true research with scientists from many different fields. And I think one of the fields that is really needed is geophysicists, because the types of stones we want to understand, it feels and it looks and it seems like it's specifically chosen, the combination of stones. So what can we understand? Why is these stones are chosen to be not any type of alabaster, white calcite, especially, for example, milky quartz. And there are stones that we have no clue where or how did they brought it. And one of the best examples that really, blows my mind away is that pyramid in El Fayoum, Hawara pyramid, that has a whole chamber inside, single solid piece from yellow transparent quartzite, single solid piece that weighs 110 tons inside a mud brick structure. First,
Yeah.
it's definitely, if you're looking for something decorational, you're not going to put a mud brick structure. It was
Sure.
cased with limestone, and the core of it is limestone, and it had a very unique system of tunnels in it. Egyptologists think it's to mislead the tomb raiders, of course. And also it had a unique sliding doors system in the ceiling. That sliding door in the focal chamber is 45 tons.
Wow.
So what kind of a secret is this anyway? Because it's not easy to slide a door that's 45 tons.
Sure.
And the fact that it used to have another structure connected to it, labeled as the labyrinth contained 3,000 chambers. Imagine
Wow.
3,000 chambers. One historian, his name is Pliny, people don't listen to him because he exaggerated in many things. But he said just by opening a door inside this place, a sound like thunder will be generated inside. So imagine if that idea of sound resonance and sound levitation, and
Yeah.
imagine that you have a structure that is made out of 3,000 chambers resonating for that pyramid. You know, I would think that's where the only force you will have to move these 45-ton sliding doors. You know,
Yeah.
so where is the query of a piece like that? And
Yeah. And what can you share about the role of the water? Because we know that there are some tunnels, maybe they were related to the water because there are some theories. So how water could be working with the sites and tunnels beneath the pyramids?
water, of course, is the. There used to be a priesthood, the Wa'ad priest, and they are all about understanding the water. But we understand from new or from modern science how streams of running water can create currents of electromagnetic energy. And also, what I learned from my father, this was passed down to me from my father, that the sound that was generated by the running water, and then was regulated by the different designs in the chambers. Some is known as the false doors sometimes, and the size of the chamber. That what where the sound was originally generated from, and that there used to be the vertical shafts that would also allow the beams of light to interact with this running water. So it's a bioenergy. Running water and the sun is a bioenergy. So but these are also again about how it was working, and we are nowhere near understanding how it was working before we understand how it was built. Because if we understand, if we can prove, and if the world can accept that these ancient structures were made by advanced technology, then everything we're going to look at from the point of view that this is something like complicated, not simple, not primitive. And that will make all the difference in the research of understanding how it was functioning. And then, of course, we need experiments to be done. Otherwise, everything we're going to see will be only philosophy. So we can talk philosophy for ages, but we need one experiment to put us on the right track. So that's why actually more excavations need to be happening as well. We know, all the people in the field, they know, and we know that there is still around 80% underground, and everything that was discovered so far is nothing more than 20%. So more research need to be done, more excavation need to be done, so we can find hopefully things in its right place that was not transformed by inheritors. And this can be found, it can be found, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then we can understand some of the activation. If I was right, and the priesthood in the Old Kingdom were not the original builders, there is no doubt that them living and being like settling at the pyramid cities, they learned things. Remember, back in the days, even if they were not the original builders, still the stones were not quarried from there yet, and the levels of water was much more than today. And the elements, I'm talking about the different types of stones and the minerals, rocks and minerals, like gold and silver and electrum and copper. These things used to be in the sites as well. It was not just stones, you know. And of course, it was taken away. Of course, it was taken away. From so there used to be like an upgrade for induction, for example. some people think the bin or the capstone of the Great Pyramid was made out of this mineral from electrum, which is a blend between gold and silver. We don't have evidence, but we do have that. We do have electrum still, and of course we have the tools from gold. And in some history books, they talk about two obelisks that were taken to Iraq in Babel, I mean. And they used to be, the one was like around, each one was 90 tons of silver, pure silver. So, of course, valuable things like this was stolen from the beginning, and perhaps from the dynastic Egyptian time itself. Before other like Persians or Romans or Greeks or Arabs or anybody else come, because we can see that the dynastic Egyptians themselves, they were recycling stones. As I told you, in the official books, they have this documented from the Middle Kingdom, and because we doubt that the fourth dynasty is the original builder's timeline, so we've been researching, and by coincidence, and there is no coincidence, but by divine guidance, I would say, we found this place. And it was discovered, of course, by Professor Salim Hassan, but it was buried again. And then we were wandering around in the Giza Plateau, me and my brother Stephen Miller, and we found that place. And immediately when I saw it, I said, "Oh, that's a base of a pillar, but that's not a location where a pillar would be." So, and then we saw that there is a part of a little depiction underneath it. So that's not a space, or that's not a location for any depictions to be added on a base of a pillar, because usually this part is underground. The base of a pillar has a big part of it that is in the ground itself. So it was like surprising. And then I made my homework about it, and I found out that it's not actually it's not there as a base of a pillar, it's there as an altar for offering. So it was a clear evidence. And there is also, when we look at writings that was added later to something that's more ancient, as a stone carver, I'll tell you, I see lots of things that makes no sense to me. When you look at a statue and you find the fine details around the belly button, or the ribs in the chest, or the nails, or the claws sometimes in the sphinxes and other carvings like that, made from rose granite and diorite and very, very solid types of stones. So when we look at this, of course, it requires a tool, a sharp tool, to create these fine details in the carving, like opening the eyes, like the area, the locations in the statue that really requires sharp and fine. Not to mention that the statue itself, the way three-dimensionally it's figured, is so sharp, would challenge any stone carver today with the best tools, not with hand tools, with the best diamond circular saw tools. It still challenges all of us to make one copy that is like 90% as good as the ancient Egyptian. So if you have this tool, and then you look at the writings, especially the ones that added by Miriam Betah or Ramses from the New Kingdom, and you will find that it's a scratch, it's not soft, it's rough, and it's not straight enough. So you go back, there is one statue of Khafra from of course, Khafra, supposedly the original builder of the Middle Pyramid. And it's in the Nubian Museum in Aswan. Doesn't have a head, but the rest of the body is in a very, very good shape. This statue, the writings on it really makes you doubt that it was originally made by Khafra, because I told you about all these sharp details in the statue, and it's quite soft, and clearly the writings only was made by pounding, and lots of the pounding is not in the right place, you know. Things like this will be seen like very clear for, you know, for people like me, because I work on stones. That's, you need the experience, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't require a professional actually to tell the difference between what was added later and by the original work. So most of the time when we have guests, by the time we like visit 2 or 3 locations where we can show these things, you find that some of our guests will start to realize by their own eyes the same things in different locations, which is because it's clear. Hmm? And no one can deny it.
Yeah.
So the real, if we think of Egyptology as a temple, so the temple of Egyptology has a foundation, or as we call it, the mother stone of the temple, the biggest rock. And the mother stone of Egyptology temple is the writings. So if you take this away, then Egyptology is not going to be covering everything, because everything is no longer explained by writings. We need other explanations for the timelines, like machining, like geology, like carbon dating, and other things like that. So that's why chematology is there. That's why this label is there. That's what my father found, that most of the researchers are stuck or trapped in labeling. What shall I label this? How can this be labeled? So the label here is something is really dangerous. Once you label something, you limit it, you mold it into the label. It's a sarcophagus. Then if you label it as a sarcophagus, then it's only for one thing. But it's a box. Then if it's a box, then there must be something inside this box if I label it as a box, you know. So that's why labeling can be misleading at the same time. So we need to really research this with a free mind and free our mind as possible from all the labels that's stuck with these things, like the word Sphinx, for example. Who called it Sphinx? Herodotus. And by the way, like many people talk about Atlantis and things like that, and we all know where the origin of Atlantis is coming from, or like where the story of Atlantis is coming from. It was told for the Greek philosophers by the Egyptian priest. You know what I mean? You know this, or you don't know that?
Yeah, we heard about that.
Yes, it was told to the Greek philosophers that by the Egyptian priests that there used to be a very advanced civilization in the past. Now we label it Atlantis, or now I don't label it, but many other people label it Atlantis. And if you search about Atlantis, you will probably find much more than what the Greek philosophers heard, because much more lies were added to it, and much more fancy stories and things like that about aliens and things like that. And I don't agree with the aliens thing, because I think we are capable of this, and I think the aliens thing is a misinformation, not to allow us to develop our awareness and understand what we are capable of doing if we woke up from everything that we've been put to, you know, in life today, you know.
Yeah, and I just liked, like your father said once, like when people say that we were not capable to build such buildings, and maybe even aliens came and did that, he said that that would be really an insult for our ancestors, just to think about them, that they weren't able to do that. And we also never met our ancestors like face to face, so we can't say like they couldn't do that. So that's really, really very limiting our experiences and everything.
Yes, and I am so grateful for one other thing here. You heard about the Coral Castle?
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
Yes. Also, Christopher Dunn, God bless him. He also made a documentary about it, and I really loved it so much. And this man, he found out. He was one man, and he did lift megalithic stones, and he did, maybe he didn't find everything, but at least he find the secret about how it was done. And he was one man. He was skinny too, so there is no
yeah,
muscle there to do the job, And he was able, I think, to lift up till 15 tons, I think, by himself.
yeah,
And that's, of course, the tools he used cannot do it normally. And that's because, we know, I watched about what happened to the gate, and they brought a team, and they brought a special crane to lift that stone. And of course, they all said like it was impossible for him to lift this stone with the type of the crane that he had and he was working with, unless he was, of course, um, understanding more about gravity and levitation. So that's one of the things that really also is not allowed to be for the public. So he did found it in the modern times, and he could have like sent the research much further by now if this was shared with the world, but unfortunately it wasn't. But still, it's staying there as an evidence to tell everybody, don't think it was aliens, because humans are capable of doing this. And I will also, I heard about what he said when people asked him and they told him, how did you do it? How can you do it? And he said, it's easy if you know how.
yeah,
Yeah.
For example, I've been working with also some friends. They love the mystery and the research. Most of them are photographers. And one of the ladies believed in aliens. And I take my flute with me everywhere, of course. So I had my flute and I was playing, and she came to me and asked me like, and like she did with her arm like this, like, we cannot do this, and she's talking like muscles wise or something,
mm-hmm.
because the stones are so megalithic. Some of the blocks here in the structure is 14-meter long, of the limestone, not the granite stone. So why would anybody bother working with a piece this long? Anyway, she was telling me like, oh, we cannot be doing this, it must be aliens. She believed in aliens so much,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her, look, if you cannot play this flute and I can, that doesn't mean that aliens came and
Yeah,
taught me. So if we don't know how it was done, it doesn't mean that it's made by aliens or jinni or something. People like for the easy answer sometimes because they don't have the patience to have the research and to study.
Right.
You just want to find the fast answer and and call it a day. And
yeah, and put the label again.
Yeah.
This
yeah,
time
put the
on
link.
aliens.
Definitely a
It
lot
was
of
dragged
different stories
by
out there.
men. But just put yourself in the position of the builders and see what kind of challenges you are facing. And truly, if I don't have the tools, why would I bother work with these kinds of stones anyway? You know, I'm bringing like 7 different types of stones into a pyramid structure. These 7 different types, there is only one that is local, and there is 6 of them that is from different destination. Granite, rose granite from Aswan, black granite from the Eastern Desert, basalt also from the Eastern Desert, but a different location. White calcite from Central Egypt, quartzite from the Red Mountains. The other type of limestone, which is the pure calcium carbonate, is coming from the eastern side of the river in the Torah and Al-Ma'sara. It's a different destination. And then we have diorite. What's labeled as diorite? There are 4 different types. diorite gneiss. This one is brought between the borders of Egypt and Sudan. But there is two other types of diorite. We don't know where they are coming from actually. And the other, this is the ones that still remaining. So imagine what's missing from the structure. You know, if they came all the way, if the people who quarry or take things from the site went all the way to the limestone and granite, then you can find evidence of slate. You can find evidence of yellow and red jasper. They are not local in the place. Milky quartz and a different types of quartzite as well, like the yellow transparent quartzite, and a big combination. Some of them, yeah, in the site. I actually found pieces of andesite, which is also coming from the Eastern Desert, in the Giza Plateau. So it's a big combination. It's enough to also, this is one of the things that we also like to talk, me and my friend and brother, also Muhammad Ibrahim. He is our Egyptology man in the team. And also he's always the one who facilitates our tours, and he's our official tour guide, Muhammad Ibrahim. So we talk together a lot, me and him, about these things and how it's explained in Egyptology and how it's not making any sense. So the fourth dynasty, supposedly the one who built all the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau and more, is not more than 200 years. It's not more than 150 years, actually. The whole thing. So these pyramids, all of them are built during the fourth dynasty. So all of them, the great and the middle and the third pyramid, are built within 150 years. And the Giza Plateau was being used as a quarry at least 2100 BC. So it was used as a quarry for 4,000 years and more. So imagine the amount of stone that can be brought in 150 years, and the people will keep taking from it, building. All the Cairo is built out from the stones from the Giza Plateau, and all the old houses here, and all the other structure on the Giza Plateau itself, and the other places like the ones that was taken to Elish. Imagine for more than 4,000 years, people are quarrying from it, and this much is still there. You know what I mean? They hardly took some of it in 4,000, in more than 4,000 years of quarrying, of using it as a quarry. So it makes no sense. And the many things.
Yeah.
How many boats did, if we say the pyramid is around, the Great Pyramid alone is around 3 million blocks of stones. Okay, that's what's written in the official books. It can be more. But let's say 2 million blocks are from the local limestone, and only 1 million block is the different, all the different types of stones, from granite to quartzite and basalt and the other types of limestone. 1 million blocks to be gathered from different destinations. Some of them is coming from Sudan. Yeah, more than 1,000 kilometers from the location of the pyramid itself. So how many boats, if we can, what's the time? What is the time? They say the pyramid was built in 30 years. How long would it take? How many? We are talking about blocks of stones that begins from 1.5 ton until over 70 tons for the block, for the one block. So these million blocks, how many boats? How possibly, like how many boats they possibly could have had? 50, 100, 100 big boats, large boats to carry the stone. And we said let's say 500, and that's impossible back then. No any depictions that shows 500 large boats in any place, so they can carry this. And they cannot load these boats only one time a year. If we're talking this primitive style, they can only load it once a year with the flood. And that's how they made up the story that even these workers were not professional stone masons. No, they were farmers, that they worked in building the pyramid and during the time of the flood, and that was a way for them to be sent free from paying taxes. You know, that's what you will hear from most of the mainstream Egyptologists. So far away from this, the 500 boats. How many stones? You know, this is just a a way of talking this to understand. Even if we exaggerated with the numbers of the boats and how many stones they can carry, they carried
Hmm.
20 stones each, 20 blocks between 1.5 ton and 70 tons for the block. Of course, I'm joking. Where is the boat that's going to carry 70 tons?
Hmm.
But maybe it will. Let's say the boat will carry 20 pieces, not one. You still need 100 years just to transfer the stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said 30 years to build the pyramid.
Yeah, it just doesn't work out.
And I didn't see the time to cut it and load it and after you bring it to the location, the time that you need to build it and locate it in its place.
Hmm.
So the
Yeah.
the the ram roads they found, or the roads they found that they think it was used to build the pyramid from mud brick. Imagine moving with a 70-ton block on a mud brick road. It's going to damage the road.
Yeah.
You know that this is like really like imaginary made by people who are not professional. That's why, but that became the stories that everybody passes down. You know that, oh, how the pyramid was built. It was this like that. They built ram roads and the farmers worked in it. 100,000 workers or something like that. Where did these numbers came from? Who is Hamiyun? Just to find a tomb for a priest, and he has a title that he's the chief of all the architects, so they think, oh, he was the one who built the pyramid. Why we don't have the tombs of the priesthoods that shows any constructions being done? There is none. There is no constructions being done. Only vessels manufacturing and statue carving. And their boasts are not reflecting the sophisticated technology that we do find in the artifacts themselves. Because we do find tube drill marking in the statues and circular saw and power tools in the statues, not just in the slabs of stones. So where are these tools?
Yeah.
If the dynastic Egyptians didn't have it, so how can they be the builders? How can they be the original makers of these if they didn't have it? That's the question.
Yeah. Definitely, as you said, many arguments on both sides, as you said at the beginning of the interview. And wow, there's a lot of information here that you just gave us. I think we're coming to an end of the show for today. We definitely want
I
to,
am only working up.
yeah. Well, we want to thank you so much that you found the time to join us. That's good stuff to hear from you, and we would love to do that again with you sometime soon, and stay in contact, and maybe
Me,
even visit you someday, hopefully.
that would be the greatest because there is nothing better than seeing this in the field,
Yeah.
Yeah,
to see it with your own eyes and gain the confidence that
right.
what you see is real, not just a theory.
Yeah. So, but until then, we'll talk soon again. Again, thank you so much, and
You,
yeah,
thank you so much for
thank you
giving
so
me this
much.
opportunity.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
much
Thank
love.
you.
Okay,
Much
bye
love.
bye.
Bye
Bring it
bye.
up. Salam.
We all want to see, we all want to be real, and we're searching when we're finding. We all want to feel the taste of belief, and we search for directions where we meet with our fears. We all want to steer, we want to appear, even in the heart disappear. Just stay here and get clear. Of fear, there is no need to disappear. Just stay